There are few images in Star Wars as haunting as the mask of Darth Nihilus, a pale, expressionless visage whose hollow black eyes floating above endless robes like a face of death itself. Alongside his crimson lightsaber, these are the only pieces of Nihilus that remain, and yet unlike the relics of most Sith, these objects are more than just trophies. They are cursed. They carry an echo of his hunger. In this holocron, we're not going to retell Nihilus's origin, or the details of Malachor V. Instead, we'll focus on what relics really mean, what he left behind, his mask, his blade, and why they are unlike any other artifacts in Star Wars. Because unlike other Sith Lords, Nihilus was not truly a man, he was an anomaly, a wound in the Force itself. But what exactly does that mean? To understand why Nihilus lingers where other Sith fade, you need to understand what he really was. Nihilus was not a man who became a Sith, he was a wound. The detonation of the mass shadow generator at Malachor did more than kill soldiers and crush fleets. It tore into the heart of the Force itself. Life was there at one moment, and then it was completely blinked out. Most of the survivors felt trauma, cut off from the Force, but Nihilus felt hunger. He didn't simply breathe in the dark side, he became dependent on it, like a parasite latched onto the wound that had birthed him. From that moment, he was no longer a person any longer. He was absence wearing a mask. Other Sith are consumed because they desired. Exar Kun lusted for immortality. Vitiate drained entire planets to fuel his rituals, but Vitiate chose when to feed. Nihilus was different. His hunger was not ambition, it was a need. He consumed not out of strategy, but out of compulsion, like a black hole that cannot help but pull everything into itself. That is why his relics still echo, because unlike the spirits of Kun or Ragnos, Nihilus's essence was not tied to personality or legacy. It was tied to the wound of Malachor itself, a scar in the Force that carried inside of himself. Even after his body dissolved, that scar still remained. The anomaly of Nihilus. Most Sith, even the greatest of them, follow a pattern. They seek power, they seek to rule, and they die. Some may leave behind spirits, holocrons, or cursed tombs, but their presence eventually fades into the backgrounds of history. Exar Kun's spirit clung to Yavin 4. Marka Ragnos's lingered as a voice. Palpatine cloned himself. Vader left behind nothing more than fear and a legend. Nihilus was different. His death did not erase him. His hunger was not extinguished. What he left behind was not a ghost, not a holocron, not even a memory. He left behind a wound, a literal tear in the Force that clung to the physical objects that he once touched. His mask and his lightsaber became extensions of that wound. To understand why this matters and what makes it unique, imagine walking into a Sith temple on Korriban, on Ziost, on Malachor. These nexuses of dark energy are oppressive. They radiate malice, suffocation, a kind of spiritual gravity that weighs on anyone sensitive to the Force. Darth Nihilus himself was like a walking Sith temple. His presence was not the presence of a man, but rather of a void, and when he was destroyed, fragments of that void remained behind. The mask. The mask is the most iconic remnant of Darth Nihilus. When Mitra Surik and her allies finally brought him down aboard the Ravager, his body dissolved. He collapsed into nothing but emptiness, leaving behind only his robes and his mask. It's one of the most chilling deaths in Legends because it doesn't feel like a person dying. It feels like a hole is finally closing. And yet the mask itself retained part of that tear. Legends RPG sources of a fan guide often treat the mask as cursed. To wear it or to even hold it was to feel drained, like your life was slowly beginning to siphon away. The mask was not a symbol of who Nihilus had been, it was the vessel of what he had become. Think about what this means compared to other Sith relics. Freedin Nad's sarcophagus carried whispers of his spirit. Exar Kun's amulet could unleash blasts of dark energy. But Nihilus's mask didn't empower, it consumed, just like its master did. His hunger was so absolute that even when his form was gone, the mask carried the echo of that same hunger. In this way, the mask was like a portable nexus of the dark side. To stand near it was to feel the same suffocation as standing in the temple built by the Sith. But unlike temples, which were anchored in one place, the mask of Nihilus could be moved, carried, and spread. It was a wound that lingered like a disease. And then the lightsaber. At first glance, Nihilus's lightsaber is unremarkable. A standard crimson blade, an unremarkable hilt. The iconic symbol of the Sith, sure, but it lacked the exotic designs of Exar Kun, the elegance of Dooku's curved lightsaber, or the mystical grandeur of Ragnos' scepter. But here's the difference. Darth Nihilus' lightsaber had been steeped in his aura for years. He had wielded it while consuming entire planets, while feeding his hunger on fleets and armies. the lightsaber absorbed that presence like a sponge. RPG material about the artifacts and cursed objects in the galaxy notes that items closely tied to the Sith of great power often inherit fragments of their master's essence. In the case of Nihilus, this meant that the lightsaber itself carried the same hollow resonance as the mask. To wield it was to feel gnawed at by the void. To ignite it was to hear the whispers of hunger. Other Sith lightsabers were weapons of destruction. Darth Nihilus's was a reminder that he was no longer a man carrying a weapon. He was hunger given form. The lightsaber was cursed not by design, but by association. It became less a weapon and more a relic of absence. But here's what makes Darth Nihilus really terrifying. He is not remembered for his conquests or even his personality. He is remembered for his condition. He had ceased to be a person. He was a parasite in the Force, feeding without limit. This is why his relics feel so unique compared to other Sith artifacts. Palpatine's lightsabers didn't drain those who touched them. Vader's lightsaber didn't carry the weight of Mustafar. Plagueis' experiments may have warped life, but his possessions were still tools. Nihilus cursed even the most basic of objects, a mask, a lightsaber, simply by existing. His essence clung to them because his essence was hunger. And hunger doesn't die, it lingers and it waits. But there is something else strange about the mask and the lightsaber of Nihilus that he left behind. Where other Sith relics expand their wielder, Nihilus's curse diminishes them. They are the anti-artifact, drawing in instead of radiating out. In this sense, they are far more terrifying and damaging. Just like Nihilus, they don't even really have a will of their own other than to feed. They are not teaching tools or sources of knowledge, they are traps. This is why Nihilus is one of the most haunting Sith in all of Legends. He is not remembered as a schemer like Sidious. He is not remembered as a conqueror like Revan. He is remembered as the void that he was, an anomaly. And that anomaly explains why his relics lingered when others fade. His hunger was not tied to his spirit, it was tied to the Force itself, like a scar burned into reality. The mask and the saber are the scar tissue, not remnants of life, but remnants of the wound. So when we talk about Darth Nihilus's mask and the lightsaber, we're not talking about trophies, we're talking about cursed objects. We're talking about the echo of a wound in the Force that refused to heal even after Nihilus was seemingly gone. Most Sith die, their legacies rot in tombs, but Nihilus left behind hunger. Hunger that whispers through his mask and his lightsaber. Hunger that can never be silenced. And this leaves us with the chilling question. If Darth Nihilus could curse even the simplest objects with his emptiness, what would the galaxy itself become if his hunger went unchecked? Would the stars themselves have become his relics? The earliest records of the mask after Nihilus's fall take place aboard a ship known as the Nishuaga, a smuggling vessel that crashed on the remote planet of Volek. When salvagers uncovered the wreckage, they discovered the ghost white mask among the debris. Even in this context, it was immediately classified as a Sith artifact. Its aura of corruption was undeniable even to those that could not touch the Force. From here, the mask entered centuries of rumor and legend. Tales spread across the galaxy that the relic was infused with the dark side, so potent that even non-Force sensitive beings could gain the powers of a Sith apprentice simply by putting the mask on. For trained Jedi or Sith, it was said to offer new prophecies, always slanting towards destructive powers. The mask was less a tool of study, and more a direct conduit to the void that Darth Nihilus embodied. Over the next 4,000 years, its reputation only grew. Stories warned that every wielder who tried to harness the mask's gifts was slowly driven towards acts of ruin and self-destruction, compulsively. The same compulsion that forced Nihilus to feed. Where nearly all other Sith artifacts preserved knowledge or granted power, Nihilus's mask devoured those who touched it, pulling them down the same path of annihilation that consumed its master. By the end of the timeline, the mask stood as one of the most infamous relics in the entire galaxy, a curse distinguished as a promise of power, one of the most famous Sith relics that have ever existed in the lore. His lightsaber, by contrast, is far more quiet. We know far less about it, and unlike the mask, it was never whispered about as an artifact of legend. What makes it stand out, though, is ironically, its lack of distinction. As we mentioned earlier, the weapon was streamlined, almost a boring design, a standard red lightsaber devoid of ornament or exotic modifications. For a Sith Lord of such apocalyptic power and hunger, his lightsaber was surprisingly unamusing. What mattered was not the hilt, but the hand that wielded it. This was the blade that had been present as Nihilus drained fleets and devoured worlds, and in that way, it carried the same echo of his presence. But in the centuries after his death, it endured without the same infamy as his mask. The lightsaber was remembered as the weapon of nightmare, yet it never achieved the same cursed reputation. Seemingly, the galaxy itself understood that it was not the weapon, but Nihilus himself that was the anomaly. The weapon survived, but like so many other relics of the old Sith Wars, it was eventually lost to time and legend. But here's the deep question. If even a mask and a lightsaber could carry the echo of Nihilus's emptiness for thousands of years, what would have become of the galaxy if his hunger had not been stopped? Would the stars themselves again become cursed relics themselves, hollow echoes of a devoured universe? If you would like to keep exploring the darkest corners of Star Wars legends, make sure to subscribe, and think of it as anchoring yourself against the void, so that Nihilus doesn't swallow these stories before you can learn and hear from them. But until next time, lore junkies, what are your thoughts on the fate of Nihilus's mask and lightsaber following his destruction? And would you put on the mask of Nihilus if you ever found it?